Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our Associate Editor, Lenore Fedow. Lenore will be interviewing two experts in the field of jewelry appraisals. Gail Levine, Executive Director of the National Association of Jewelry Appraisers, and Mark T. Cartwright, the chair of the Gems and Jewelry discipline at the American Society of Appraisers. Before I turn the discussion over to Lenore and her guests, I just want to let all our attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of their screens. I'll be back on at the end of the discussion to facilitate the Q&A. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, June 25th. Now, turn it over to Lenore to get things started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Gail and Mark, for joining me today. I'm so happy to have you both here. We're going to be speaking about jewelry appraisals, but first I wanted to give you both a chance to introduce yourself. Let's start with Gail.
So I've been a gemologist for over 40 years now, and I've been the executive director of the National Association of Jewelry Appraisers since 2004. It's been a dream. It's been my heart's desire. I'm very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here. And Mark?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of everything in the jewelry business. I had an independent jewelry store for about 15 years or so, and have earned the highest designations from AGS, NAJA, ISA, and now ASA. So I love to learn. I love to share what I learn. Currently, I'm an independent appraiser and the chair of the Gems and Jewelry discipline for ASA, as well as one of their course developers and instructors. But yeah, life is good.
So yeah, that's why it's good to have both of you here today. These are bona fide appraisal experts. We're going to start off with the very basics. I'm going to give my first question to Mark, and then Gail, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
Why should someone get a jewelry appraisal?
Well, the obvious answer is to find out what the jewelry is worth or the replacement value. Probably the most common request we get, and most jewelry appraisers get, is for scheduling insurance coverage. But there are dozens of intended uses, if not more. Everything from litigation to division of an estate or divorce, estate tax, gift tax, donation. There are a lot of reasons that people come to us for appraisal.
And actually, they also come to find out just exactly what they have for their own edification and go, oh, I did not know that. I get that all the time.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So if someone was a bit reluctant to get one, or wasn't really sure that they needed one, what would you say to them? What would be your selling points?
I've never had that happen to me. I've had lawyers who have the wrong information, or they have they try to give me the wrong direction. But I've never really had anyone that's been reluctant. How about you?
Yeah, well, mostly since people call us, they're already mostly pre-sold, but essentially it's a service, and like any other service, you need to sell the benefits. And there are a lot of occasions where I'm sure Gail and I both talk people out of it, where they really don't need an appraisal. What they need is an offer to purchase the piece, or maybe they just need things separated and that's it. But like any other service or product, you need to sell the benefits. And if it's truly going to be a benefit to the client, then it's usually a pretty easy sell.
Yeah. What I have found is that most of the time the reluctance has to do with the fee that's going to be charged. Excuse me, going to be charged. And they go, oh, well, I did not know it's going to be that much. And then that's when your skills come in, about lawyers charge, dentist charge, And my favorite line is, even hookers charge. So,
yeah. I wouldn't know anything about that yet.
Of course not.
Well, that leads into my next question. On average, what is the cost of an appraisal?
Well, that's like saying, what's the cost of a red car? It all depends on what the assignment is, how difficult it's going to be, the research is going to be involved in it, and actually geographically. I know in New York, we charge a lot more than someone from Des Moines, Iowa.
Right.
Mark?
Yeah. Basically, our rates are based on an hourly fee. And as Gail said, the more complex the assignment, the more research involved, the more complex the piece, the more expensive it's going to be. But typically, I would say for us in Albuquerque, the range is maybe 150 to up to 800 or 1,000 or more for a given piece of jewelry or assignment.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Those are the scary ones. Those are the ones with the lawyers involved.
Now, something I've always wondered is what type of jewelry is worth getting appraised? Is it only a special piece of jewelry like an engagement ring, or can you appraise something simple like a gold chain?
Yeah, a gold chain, but I would be reluctant to tell the client that a full-blown appraisal on a gold chain is really not necessary. They can go to the jewelry store and find out what the replacement is for that gold chain. But certainly diamonds and gemstones, signed pieces. But as far as sterling silver and as costume jewelry, it all depends. If the sterling silver jewelry is David Yurman and it has diamonds in it, if the costume jewelry is Hattie Carnegie, it all depends. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, really, we sort of leave that up to the client, and it is often related to the fee. I mean, a really fine piece of costume jewelry is going to take just as much time to do the research.
Yeah.
The photography and the description and all of that. So we sort of give people an idea of how long it's going to take to answer the questions that they have. And then they get to decide. But we've had some equitable division and estate pieces that were nobody got along. Everybody wanted to know. I mean, we had to put values all the way down to broken chains and one costume earring. So was it worth doing it? Well, the executor thought it was, just because everybody was fighting and no one was going to get along and they wanted a number for everything. So it's really up to the client, but we usually advise them that if the appraisal fee is going to be more than it's worth or even close, they might want to reconsider.
Yeah, it's kind of like the class action suit that you get like from General Motors or from IBM or something. And the lawyers say, if you want to sign in, there'll be a benefit to you, a financial benefit to you. And you end up with a check for $3.56. Meanwhile, the lawyers are ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. So it's, if there's an internal strife going on in the family, it's kind of like when you're sitting with Grammy and she wants to tell you stories, and you have to remind her, we're on an hourly rate here. TikTok,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you guys are in a little bit of a dramatic business. I wouldn't have thought that.
Not often, but every once in a while it does get exciting. Yeah.
So now this is a little bit of a broad question, but when you are writing up an appraisal report, what details absolutely need to be included?
Well, we have an NAJA report writing standards, and this is 12 pages long. And on the first page is 11 elements that need to be in an appraisal. The cover page, table of contents, scope of work, assumptions and limit conditions, confidentiality statement, certification of appraisal practice, body of the appraisal report, the addenda, appraisal qualifications, and definitions and glossary. And then the rest of the 11 pages are how-tos. So that's it in a nutshell. It is so much more complicated than that. And I'm sure that ASA has something comparable to this also, something that is the Bible.
Yeah, basically ASA, everything that is taught and everything we do with ASA is grounded in the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice.
Exactly.
But really, it's the amount of detail in a report is based on the assignment. What is going on? If an insurance appraisal typically has most detail in it, because it may be relied on by the insurance company for replacement. So it gets the most description. We do have the ASA descriptive elements that, again, go on for pages and pages and pages. But it's essentially based on if it's relevant. But the most important thing that always has to go into any report is anything about the piece that relates to value, whether it's a positive attribute or a negative attribute. And if it relates to the value opinion, then it has to be in the report. But details like ring finger size, that sort of stuff, for an estate tax appraisal, no, it doesn't need to be in there. For equitable division, it probably doesn't need to be in there. For an insurance appraisal, maybe it does, because if it's a size 4, then the cost of having a mounting size down will need to be considered in any replacement. So,
or an attorney van.
Yep, exactly.
That can't be sized. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on a lot of different factors what you're going to include.
Yeah.
Now, the two of you are both certified appraisers, several degrees between the both of you, but there are other less qualified people who may also offer appraisals. Why is it important for someone to go to a certified appraiser?
Well, I'm going to let Mark answer that since he has the top designations for organizations. I mean, aside from he loves to learn, I'm sure there's an underlying reasoning behind his collection of diplomas and certifications.
Yeah, no, actually the underlying reason was I really do want to learn, and I have never believed that any single organization had all of the answers. So I wanted to find out what everybody says. But honestly, competency is far more important than any initials after somebody's name. So before either a prospective appraiser out there in the audience or a consumer just relies on some initials after somebody's name, they really need to find out more about A, that person, B, the organization that gave them those initials. And does it really matter for what they're trying to do? And is that person competent in that assignment? So finding a certified appraiser, some education is better than none, because a lot of people assume that if you're a gemologist, that means you can appraise. That's not true. But certification in and of itself does not make somebody competent for any specific assignment.
Well, and also what you also have to add in there as a factor is how long they have been appraising. When was the last time they updated their information, including GIA or going to their organizational conferences? Now, right now, it's really easy to do because everyone's on Zoom. But, you know, it's where rubber hits the road. I know a lot of appraisers, unfortunately, I know a lot of appraisers that after they got their GG and they joined the appraisal organization, all they wanted was that membership on the wall to give their customers, their clients, peace of mind. And it's not a good thing.
It doesn't mean they can do their job. It just
That's
means they think they can do their job.
Yeah, that means their check cleared.
Yeah. Right. So very important to look at the whole picture when you're trying.
Exactly.
And secondly, to this question, does your jewelry appraiser have to be a gemologist?
Well, one of the things that I constantly say is, especially for new gemologists or gemologists that are in the process of becoming a gemologist, is that gemology and appraising are synergistic. You can't have one without the other. You can't say a ruby is a garnet, and you can't give a liquidation value to an insurance value. So you have to know what you're doing in both realms.
Right.
Mark?
Yeah, for ASA and in general, yeah, you do have to be a gemologist, but again, being a gemologist doesn't make you an appraiser. It's kind of like a doctor. Your GP, your general practitioner, needs to be an MD, but that doesn't make him a surgeon.
Right.
But your surgeon better be an MD. So it's two, they're very related fields, but they're parallel tracks.
I gotcha. That makes sense to me. So now that you've both convinced me that I should have my jewelry appraised, where should I go to find an appraiser?
So what I would do if I were you is I would look on the 4 appraisal organizations. Well, AGA is not really an appraisal organization, but they do have certified appraisers. And find someone in all the 4, find someone in your area, look at their credentials, look at their membership level. But definitely, I wouldn't, do a Google appraisers in my area. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but most of the appraisal organizations, NAJA has a find an appraiser search function on their website. ASA has a find an appraiser section on their website. So that's a good place to start, I would say. Having been a CGA and an ICGA, I would try to find an appraisal specialist as opposed to a jeweler who does some appraising on the side.
Right.
I would try to find an independent appraiser that's how they make their living and that's what they do.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. And in all the ISA, ASA, AAA, and NAJA, we all have not only state and city and or locations, but we also have the specialties that this appraiser has. And this is also important. So if you have a Suzanne Bell Perron, you don't want someone who has a specialty in antique and period jewelry.
Gotcha. And now for someone who has already had their jewelry appraised, how often should they bring it back to you to be reappraised?
Well, usually in my appraisal reports, I do address that, and I do suggest at least every 2 to 3 years because the market changes. And as we've seen the last couple of years, it's been very volatile. So I suggest 2 to 3 years. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, typically every 2 to 5 years. It depends on the piece. Really, some types of jewelry the market's been really stable for a very long time. Cultured pearls, Akoya pearls.
True.
The market on that has been really stable for a long time. But as the price of gold has pushed up close to $2,000, even a heavy solid gold chain that maybe 10 years ago they paid $600 for is now all of a sudden worth double that. So it really depends on the piece, but USPAP requires us to keep our records for a minimum of 5 years. With digital files these days, I've got appraisals going back 20 years. So yeah, probably 2 to 5 years, depending on the piece.
Yeah, and keeping them beyond 5 years is great historical reference for you too. Yeah.
To your point, I mean, market values are changing all the time.
Yeah.
So what resources do you use to stay up to date on these price fluctuations and different trends in the market?
The shows, Tucson show, the JCK show, and of course conferences, and having experts in different fields come in and tell you about their product and good, better, best. It's critical that you stay up to date. Mark?
Yeah, basically, they're the typical internet sources, IDEX, RapNet, Polygon, those sorts of massive data fields where sellers can show you what they're selling. going to the jewelry shows, making contacts, keeping in touch with vendors is essential. Conferences are a great way to do it, but because every piece that crosses our desk has to be researched, there's on a daily piece by piece basis, an appraiser really should be keeping up with the market with every piece that crosses their desk. So
Mark, how do you feel about price guides, like gem guide?
I think they're good for showing market trends. I think that relying solely on them can be a huge mistake that some appraisers make, because they're really, the gem guide is a valuable public. I've subscribed to the gem guide for over 20 years. I still subscribe to it. But what they're providing is an opinion of wholesale value. They're really not providing wholesale cost information. So if an appraiser is trying to follow the cost approach to value, that's really not a true cost. You get a true cost by talking directly to the sellers. But it's a valuable publication. Like I said, I still subscribe.
Yeah, I use Gem Guide as a benchmark because I'm fortunate enough to be living in New York, so I can go down to the belly of the beast and find out what the skinny really is. But I think the hardest thing that has been for appraisers, and especially with Gem Guide being a part of appraisal software, is that they'll take that value and not research what is really going on with it, because it's supposed to come out quarterly, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's quarterly. Yeah. So things could change.
Yeah, it's huge. An appraiser should never rely on a single source of information. You really need a broader view of the market and what's really going on.
Yeah.
So having a reference number is nice to know, so that you can tell whether or not a diamond dealer is blowing sunshine up your shorts, or if they're actually giving you legitimate information.
Yeah. Well, like all of them, whether it's Rappaport and IDEX and Gem Guide, it's a guide. That's the key word. It's that guide.
Right.
It's not coming down from the mountaintop. It's a guide. Yeah.
Right. So you're relying a lot on your own experience and knowledge as well.
Well, your contacts, and this is one of the things that, especially for new gemologists and new appraisers, it takes shoe leather. It takes going to shows and asking questions and being patient, and knowing what questions to ask, even more important.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it's really about developing a network of resources.
Yeah.
And that does take time and experience, because even if you go to the shows, mostly they won't talk to you if you're not showing some green. But on the other hand, you can kind of be a little bit sneaky and pick up a business card and talk to the person, write a few notes on the card, and then if you go, hey, look, I'm looking for something that these people sell, you can call them up. Go, hey, I'm Mark. Remember we met at the AGTA show in Tucson, and nobody that's a salesman on the other end of the phone in their right mind is going to go, no, I don't know you. They'll always go, oh, yeah, I remember you. What can I help you with? So that's one of the advantages of face-to-face and going to shows, is that you can make contacts, and over time, they become friends. They become people that you can rely on.
And because of, because I live here in New York, and I can go down, I can get to Manhattan in 20 minutes. If I have something that I need to research at Bulgari or Tiffany, I just go in the store. And unfortunately, I have to act at times as Mrs. Consumer. My husband wants to buy me.
Undercover work. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do it on the phone too.
So switching gears here just a little bit, when I think of appraisals, I tend to think of that show, and I'm sure everyone has seen it, Antiques Roadshow, right? Where people bring in these family heirlooms or other items and they want to see what they're worth. And my favorite episodes have always been when someone brings in like, this painting that they got at this garage sale for like $5. And this art expert tells them it's like this long lost Rembrandt and it's worth like millions. Like, to me, that is just like so cool. That is so much fun. But have you ever had this sort of antiques roadshow moment where a customer brought you something that was even more special than they thought that it was?
Yeah, I had a Dreiser turn of the century stick pin with a natural pearl, and she thought it was costume. And so when I came up with the value on it, she was like, no, but it just looked like the roadshow. No. But of course, hers with a lot more expletives,
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right. That's such a shock.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
One of the advantages of being an independent appraiser is a lot of the jewelers in the area will just dump stuff that they don't want to have anything to do with on you. And I had a couple show up with literally a shoebox full of stuff. The local AGS stores, CGAs had gone through it and picked out the fine jewelry. And this was all costume jewelry. But they said, take it to Mark because sometimes costume jewelry has value. And they dumped it out on the table, and in it were a half dozen exquisite Georgian pieces. But what?
Now you're talking.
Oh, I know. There was a beautiful sterling silver snake bracelet that was completely pavéed with turquoise cabochons. And they went, oh, it's sterling silver. It's not worth anything. But there was a necklace laying there that I picked up, and I was looking at it, and I started looking for it, and I found a series of eagle head hallmarks on it,
Hey.
which they were single border eagle head marks. And so that told me that it was 18 karat gold, it was French, and because that specific mark was only put on jewelry between 1837 and 1843, it told me a lot about the piece, and it had natural pearls and Colombian emeralds, and I laid it down and I said, that's not costume. And found another piece that was marked peacock on the inside of it, which is a jewelry store in Chicago that was the Tiffany's of Chicago, basically. And it was set with demantoid garnets. And they told them, well, this might be gold, but those are just peridot, so they're not worth any money. So out of that little shoebox, I found probably 8 pieces that had significant value. And they turned white, looked at each other and said, we'll be back. And went to the jewelry store and got everything else and came back and said, if they don't know what this is, I don't trust them to know what the rest of this is.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
finding that beautiful canatille work necklace in there was exciting for me, but they went through the roof that when they found the value of that. So
this was in Albuquerque?
No, that was actually in Fayetteville.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
believe it or not, just for fun, in Fayetteville, I actually had got to see 8 pieces of Paulding Farnham jewelry.
Oh. Now that's a free zone. That's a free zone. Lucky guy.
And this is going to be my last question for you guys. Do you have a favorite type of jewelry to appraise? Maybe a favorite era that you see pieces from?
Yeah. Well, as you probably saw with my my reaction to Mark about the Georgian pieces, that's what melts my butter. I love the Georgian era. I love the rose cut diamonds, the closed back, the silver top gold. I just love the whole thing. I just love the whole thing. And it's such a challenge because it used to be, for a while, it was brought up at auction, I'm going to say about 10, 15 years ago. And now you just don't see much anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Mark,
And,
what melts your butter?
well, I'm sort of, I love to do research. I love to learn more stuff about stuff because every time I research a piece, I learn something new. But probably pieces made before World War II. I just really love all of the handwork. After World War II, because of the war effort, a lot of mass production techniques started being applied to jewelry, as well as the lack of master goldsmiths. So I really love that era, but there's a little section after World War II and before 1970 and all the nugget jewelry, where there were some wonderful artisan jewelers, some wonderful artists who were also making jewelry. And those pieces are a lot of fun and a real pain in the patootie to do research on because you know it's a really well-made piece and you know it's really wonderful and there's just no published information about that person.
Yeah.
So, but you know, just things that excite me and I go, wow, this is going to be a lot of funded research and it's going to take me 10 hours to do the research and there's no way I can charge you for the amount of time I'm going to spend on this piece.
That's the price of education.
Yeah. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've paid a price for education.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like the two of you both have very fun careers and you seem to really enjoy them.
We do.
Yeah. He's working for a living.
Well, that is going to be it for my questions. I really appreciate both of you being with me here today. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. I know we had a couple audience questions come in. My questions were a little bit broad, but our audience has some pretty specific questions for the two of you. So I'll turn it over to Michelle and she can get that part started.
Thanks, Lenore, Gail, and Mark. And thank you so much to Gail, who I believe is the first person to bring up Hooker on a National Jeweler webinar. So we appreciate that, Gail. That was great. You came to play today and we like it.
Yeah.
And thanks to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box. I'm going to try to get to as many as possible, but we had a lot of questions beforehand and they were pouring in during the discussion. So, and I apologize, we're not going to get to everyone today, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to give people a minute to enter the questions. And I just want to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed, from flexible memo options to a partnership with Beers Group Industry Services to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That is rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. You both introduced yourself at the beginning of the panel, but we had a couple listeners who want to know a little bit more about how your careers began and progressed in jewelry appraisals. We had two different questions along those lines. Like, how did you get started and how did you kind of end up being a jewelry appraiser? And Gail, we'll go to you first.
Okay, so back in 19 whatever, my husband and I opened up a shop in Old Town Alexandria, an antique shop. And I started, started out small with glass and china and silver, and then progressed to furniture. And then pretty soon jewelry kind of took over because when you did shows, antique shows, it was a heck of a lot easier to bring jewelry with you than furniture. And then following on the heels of a divorce, my daughter and I moved to New York, and I went to GIA and got my gemology diploma. And my first job out of GIA from Eunice Miles, God bless her, was at H. Stern Jewelers as their North American appraiser. Now, at that time, what that meant was that when H. Stern customers came into Manhattan to have the jewelry appraised, it was mainly a currency conversion. This was, I'm telling you, this was 1970s. So, and then I joined ISA, and then in 2002 or 2001, I joined NAJA, and it's been my passion ever since. Mark?
Mark, same question to you. How do you get, what did you start out doing and how did you get to where you are?
Well, I started cutting stones when I was about 12 and making jewelry in my teen years. And my dad and I opened a jewelry store, which we ruined a perfectly good hobby, I will say. And as a jeweler, people would come in and ask me to appraise their jewelry. And I told them, no, I don't do that. I don't know anything about how to do that. And all my other jeweler friends said, no, it's not that big a deal. Just, look at it, figure out how much you would charge for it. And there is your appraisal. And I'm going, well, that's not right. But they still do it because there are no regulations governing who can or can't appraise. But I had a gentleman who was known as the Indian, who was a collector for one of the casinos in Las Vegas, who came into the shop and said, I need some stuff appraised. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't do that. And he said, nope, everyone in town says you're the guy who knows about colored gemstones. You're going to do it. And I said, no, maybe you didn't hear me. I don't do appraisals. And he leaned across the counter. He was a collector. And if the Indian showed up at your door, no was not an answer. So he leaned across the counter and he said, maybe you didn't hear me. And about that time, my dad came out of the back and introduced himself, and the two of them hit it off great. Then my dad said, Mark, you can appraise this gentleman's stuff. And I went, so that was my first appraisal, and it scared me so badly, I knew I had to become more educated. So I joined AGS, went through their education, such as it was. Actually sat through 3 days of Ellie Rosen, joined ISA. I became a CGA with AGS. And in 2000, I left the store that I was the jewelry designer for and became an independent appraiser. And joined ISA, eventually became an ISA cap, joined NAJA at the same time. And it took forever for Gail to finally convince me to do the CMA thing. But I think I was the third? In the meantime, I joined ASA and discovered I was always a USPAP, Uniform Standards, always a USPAP wonk. And when I discovered that everything they do is based explicitly on USPAP, I was hooked. So I eventually became the CMA with NHAA 5-6 years ago, was an ISA cap, and then joined ASA, became an accredited senior appraiser and master gemologist appraiser with them.
And now you're USPAP instructor.
Now I'm a USPAP instructor. Yep. See, that's as big a wonk as it gets.
Well, I think
a ton of acronyms to remember.
I know that's like a whole discipline in itself, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the answer from what you've just told us here and from what you discussed during this session is you studied and researched and did appraised and looked a lot of jewelry to get where you are.
Yes.
Long story short, and you have to continue to look at jewelry to keep your skills up.
Yeah, it's still self-directed. It's still self-directed. I mean, even with all the educations being offered, and with ASA and NAJA, we offer a lot. It's still self-directed where you need to go outside and study and get information.
Right. So we have a couple questions that came in about like specific appraisal situations. So somebody wants to know if you have certificates from different gem labs that have differing quality opinions, what do you do about this conundrum?
Mark?
Hey, wait a minute. A lot is going to depend on, you have to look at the date on the grading report. You need to look at the reputation of the laboratory and whether or not that's their specialty. Things are changing so rapidly. I know, for instance, an accredited gem lab, which is like the lab in the United States for colored gemstones, a grading report that's 5 years old or 6 years old from them saying that a stone has not been heated, that stone needs to go back because the technology and the understanding of all of the treatments and everything that are going on has changed so dramatically that a lot of stones, I fancy colored diamonds with grading reports from GIA that are 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 years old. Those are worthless. So you have to look at the date of the report. You have to go and do the research in the laboratory. But if you're doing it as an appraiser, you need to look at the market and see what buyers and sellers, how do they feel about that report? And you'll find that, like with diamonds, if it's not a GIA grading report, there's often a discount at the wholesale level because knowledgeable buyers and sellers understand that GIA is the 900-pound gorilla. And whether they're right or wrong, the price is based on what they say. So if it's a lab that's not GIA, then you let the market decide where the value is.
You know, as a matter of fact, at auction now, if you have a valuable gemstone and sapphire, or like Burma, or even I'm losing my words here, Padaiba, the auction houses will have 2 to 3 gemological reports for comfort level, and so that you can, you know, it's like, it's sort of, one of them disagrees, you have the consensus opinion of 2 of them. But rarely do they disagree, you know, because everyone now has equipment that will do everything but make cappuccino. It's unbelievable, really.
And they share the databases for the most part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to ask another question about diamonds, and I think we all knew this one was going to come. Someone wants to know about the liability of grading natural versus lab-grown diamonds. And this listener says, we've changed our policy to send any larger 0.7 carats and bigger to GIA. Is this best? How are you I guess the general question here is, how are you kind of navigating the minefield of, you're looking at something, and as an appraiser with the naked eye, you can't tell lab-grown versus natural. So what do you recommend, like just sending all the diamonds to a lab?
Well, you know, at this point, there is enough gemological equipment out there to discern between diamond, natural diamond, and synthetic diamond. And if you have an indicator in your own equipment that, nope, this is not a diamond, then that's when I send it to GIA.
Right. Because like, even though, Gail, sorry to interrupt, but even though there is equipment for you to have at home, most of the time when you get with equipment, with my understanding, it's a refer.
You can't. You gotta have it.
No,
right.
You can't do this without equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know there is equipment you use at home to tell natural versus lab grown, but in a lot of cases, what you get is a refer, like pass or refer, meaning refer it to a lab.
Right.
Well, a lot of those are diamond type testers. Type 2 diamonds are very rare in natural stones, but they're very common in fact, that's pretty much all of the manufactured diamonds. But there are certain inclusions. As a skilled gemologist, if you're keeping up with the techniques and keeping up with the technology and keeping up with what's out there, there are inclusions that are found in natural diamonds that are not currently found in laboratory grown diamonds or in manufactured diamonds. So you can screen, but if there's a real question in your mind, and you have to have enough evidence to base your value on for it to be credible. And if you don't have that evidence, you either tell them that it has to go off to a lab for testing, or you decline the job, basically.
Yeah. Well, in June, there's going to be a GIA class on synthetic diamonds. And I would also recommend that if you're, if you are at a place where the rubber hits the road, if you don't stalk Bronco Diljanin and learn from him, get his books, take his free Zooms, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
I'm sorry, Brett, Gail, who did you say? I didn't hear you. Cut out there for a second.
Bronco Diljanin.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you've got to learn. You've got to know.
Another question related to specific items. How do you handle charm bracelets with multiple large charms with gemstones?
For a lot of money.
Well, I mean, this ties back into what you said earlier when I think, Lenore, you asked about pricing and you said, well, it depends on how complicated it is, et cetera.
Right. They're amongst the most complex pieces that we're going to face because each one of those charms is essentially a separate piece of jewelry. A lot of times, if you can find a Rembrandt Charms website, whatever, if you can find similar pieces, if you need to, depending on the intended use, sometimes you can say, all right, charms that look kind of like this are selling for $80 a gram. Charms that look kind of like this are selling for $200 a gram. So you can sometimes do a broad calculation based on the weight and the complexity of the charm, but no, they're a pain in the patootie.
Yeah.
And
the exceptions to this would be if it is an era piece, like Art Deco
Yep.
charm bracelets. I mean, then you have to do each piece. And the other exception would be if it is a piece that's provenance. Like Duke and Duchess of Windsor.
Exactly.
And I've done that too.
Hey, good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, would there ever be a situation where somebody brings you a charm bracelet and like you referenced this earlier, you might just say, you know what, like just eyeballing it, like, I don't think that's going to be worth this much. And this is going to cost like a fortune to appraise. Like I wouldn't bother. Do you ever tell anyone that?
Well, if the gemstones look like, you look them and they're synthetic, if the diamonds are single cut I1s.
Yeah. Well, with the current price of gold, even just the bracelet that they're hanging off of is going to be several $1,000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
So-
We have go ahead, Mark.
No, that's fine.
Someone else wants to know, how do you research pieces made by artist jewelers? And I think this questioner means jewelers that were fantastic jewelers, but it's not a Tiffany, it's not a Cartier, it's not a huge house with a long history. And Gail mentioned her secret shopping to like help her with research. But how do you do that? What sources do you reference? They want to know books, manuscripts, newspaper articles. They want to know more about researching kind of more lesser known artist jewelers.
For sure, for books. But the other thing is SNAG, some organizations that are for new designers. I would go there.
Did you say SNAG?
That's the Society of North American Goldsmith.
Yeah, Society of North American Goldsmith.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a lot of designers in there. And conferences, like the Association of Jewelry and Related Arts, ASRA, she has a lot of sessions on near contemporary artisans. ACC shows.
Yeah. Some of the shows like the Antique and Period Jewelry Show, the Antique Jewelry and Watch Show coming up in Vegas is a great one.
Yes.
Yeah.
If nothing else, to meet dealers.
Yeah.
And talk to dealers that might specialize in those. We share a member, Gina D'Onofrio, who was the head of the jewelry department for Heritage Auction House in Beverly Hills, and has devoted most of her life to researching artists from mid-century artists. She's a great resource and is going to be putting out a book eventually. Yeah, it's not easy. And sometimes you just have to look at who might have been their contemporary that you can find information on, that has equal stature within the market. And sometimes you just have to base value on comparables, and I'm at home today doing research for 6 reports, but in our office we have books lining the walls,
Yeah.
floor to ceiling. As an appraiser, you end up spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on instruments, education, and references.
Yeah.
So we don't get rich doing this.
But we get smart.
We get smart.
And you get a lot of initials after your name.
Yeah.
Hey, I've only got a couple now. I got rid of the ISA cap and the ICGA, so
But not NHAA.
not the NHAA. No.
We just have time here for one last question. And I thought this was, speaking of drama that we were speaking about earlier, someone wanted to know, are you indemnified as appraisers? Have you ever been sued? And along those same lines, someone wanted to know, what are the implications for producing an inaccurate or miscalculated appraisal as a certified professional? So kind of 2 questions. Are you insured, and what happens when things go wrong?
Yeah, I do have E&O insurance, which is mutual. And I've never gone bare, and I've never had an occasion to use. I have, because I'm human, there have been errors I've made. And as soon as I find out the error, I go back and clean it up right away. I don't let them discover years later or 6 months later. If I've made an error, then I own up to it. And usually the client is like, oh, okay, well, a new report would be good. So it becomes a non-issue.
Right, because you confront it head on and you go back and say very directly, I messed up, here's the correct report.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I also have E&O insurance, and you would be silly not to. It's expensive, but not nearly as expensive as losing your reputation and your business. But as far as that goes, competency and ethics and competency go hand in hand. So even USPAP says perfection is not possible. All you want to do is be credible and competent. So when mistakes happen, and they do, you reach out and say, hey, I just noticed that I said that this ring weighed 234 grams. It doesn't. It weighs 2.34 grams. I missed a decimal point. Let me fix that in my report. Just little stuff like that does not impugn your reputation horribly. But yeah, we have to be competent at what we do, and we have to be careful. So.
And actually, what happened with me and with other appraisers who also, like with Mark, who meet this head on, is that because you were proactive about this and owned up to it, your reputation increases. Oh, she made a mistake and she cleaned it up and she gave me the report and I'm good to go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I mean, it's kind of like
that.
It's kind of like the jeweler equivalent. They always tell jewelers about online reviews. You should confront them and you should reach out to them and say, even like publicly on the review, right? Hey, I'm sorry you had a bad experience. I'm going to be reaching out to you to see what we can do to make it better. And that is better than just ignoring the bad review or not confronting it at all.
Yeah.
Yep. Somebody once explained when I was telling him what I did for a living, and that as an independent, impartial, unbiased appraiser, I don't care what the jeweler thinks. If it's not my problem what my client thinks. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to have my evidence. I'm going to present my argument to value in the report. And these are the facts. And you can believe in alternative facts. You can choose not to believe it at all. That's not my problem. And he said, oh, so you're in the total honesty business. And I think as appraisers, we kind of need to consider that. We need to think of
yeah.
ourselves as being completely honest with everyone involved in the process, whether it's the client, the insurance company, whoever it is. We have to be totally honest with all of them.
Good point. Good point, Mark.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a great note to end on. Mark and Gail, thank you so much for being with us today. It was so
thank you.
interesting, and I feel like I have a lot to absorb. We had a lot of attendees. We had a lot of questions we didn't get to, but I hope they got something out of it. And Lenore, thank you so much for hosting today.
Michelle, if you want to forward us the questions, I'm sure Mark and I would love to answer them.
Oh,
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah, we'd be glad to.
So my next question is off next week, but we're going to return on Tuesday, July 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Senior editor Brecken Brandstrader will be interviewing Jewelers America President and CEO Dave Bonaparte. JA has on tap this summer, so that's including the virtual national convention and also the virtual Gem Awards. I'm going to drop a link into the chat here. So if anybody wants to go to our website and sign up for that, they can. Thank you again for joining us today. And everyone, please take care. Bye-bye.